Hey guys, quick announcement before I start the video. I'm gonna be streaming tomorrow on Twitch around 2 p.m. EST. I thought it'd be a good idea to be able to just chat and play some Valorant. If you're interested and want to stop by, follow me at twitch.tv/JitterzVal. I'll leave a link in the description. That's all I wanted to say, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hello, my name is Jitterz and welcome back to another episode of Why Nobody Plays, a series of mine where I talk about some of the least picked agents in the game. The goal of this series is to talk about the pros and cons of specific agents with lower pick rates in hopes of trying to explain why they aren't picked so often, as well as to try to come up with suggestions for how that particular agent could be improved. Anyways, without further ado, let's talk about Phoenix. So before we talk about the pros of playing Phoenix, I think it's important to quickly mention Phoenix's spot in the meta and how it's changed. Since release, he's always seemed like a solid pick. Because of that, I really didn't want to make this video, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Phoenix really has seemed to have disappeared from the meta. He had one of the only flashes in the game at the time of release, and it was definitely one of the easiest ones to use in solo queue. He could heal himself, and I think in solo queue, the duelists I would see the most often were Reyna and Phoenix. To a lot of people, I think he was almost like a second Reyna, because they could both flash and heal for themselves. And in terms of the meta, Phoenix was always considered stronger than Reyna because he didn't need to confirm a kill to use most of his utility. And in an environment that rewards selfish play, he seemed like such a great pick for a lot of players. But over the last year, the game has been evolving, and people have kind of started to realize that Phoenix is not this selfish duelist the way that Reyna is. He's a much more team-based agent than players would expect. Also, there are way more flashes in the game now that he has to compete with, now that agents like Skye, Yoru, and KO are in the game. There have been some metas where Phoenix was a top tier pick, but generally he's always kind of been a decent pick on almost all maps, and saw a steady pick rate that was pretty average. But now it feels like I rarely even see Phoenix anymore, and I would argue that he's probably the second worst duelist in the game right now, just barely above Yoru. So with that being said, I still think he's a decent pick and you can get a lot of value from him, so let's talk about his pros. The first thing Phoenix has going for him is his easy to use flash. Honestly, not much has changed with this one. Probably the easiest two flash abilities in the game to use are Reyna and Phoenix's. It does basically what you want it to do. There are definitely some more difficult ways to use it now that you have to master if you want to climb to the higher ranks. But besides that, an average player can just use the standard flash around a corner, and if their timing is right, they'll still get good value from it. The second thing I wanted to talk about is Phoenix's E, which I believe is one of the most versatile signature abilities in the game. This ability is a molly, which comes with all of the advantages of having one, but it can also be used to heal him. This combo of effects allows him to molly a choke point to slow pushes or retakes, stop enemies from peeking a specific angle, to clear an angle, to molly the bomb, and it can be used to heal you if you take chip damage. Also, since you don't take damage from the molly, you can also push through it to surprise enemies and get an easy kill. Honestly, Phoenix's signature ability is so strong, and I think most people know that. The next point I wanted to mention is that his ultimate is very strong. It's one of those ultimates where if you hear the voice line and you aren't prepared, you will start to panic. It can allow a Phoenix to take a site basically for free because you can push without having to worry about dying. Or if you're not pushing, you can still try and go for a pick with it without much risk. And it's also really good for getting information. You can push, maybe get some damage on someone, and then you know how many and which agents are pushing and can relay that information to your team. When used correctly, having Phoenix ult up is a game changer and can sometimes be the sole reason you're able to win a round. Finally, I wanted to quickly talk about his wall. It's a very handy ability. It can be used to heal yourself. It can provide your team cover when trying to push onto a site, get out of a sticky situation, or just grab the bomb or a weapon really quickly and then get out. It also gives Phoenix something to flash out of and can be really strong if used correctly. So anyways, that's all of the pros I wanted to talk about, and if you think about it, I literally talked about how every ability in his kit is strong, which is honestly why I think a lot of newer players tend to gravitate towards him, but it isn't until we dig a little deeper where we can actually see the shortcomings of his kit. And to start us off, I'm going to talk about his flash. I mentioned how it's easy to use, but it's also probably the most predictable flash in the game. I've seen so many people die from a flashed enemy and yell about how unlucky they are, or about how there's no way they could have died while an enemy is flashed. But the thing about Phoenix Flash is that you need to be around a corner to use it. Which means if a player starts spraying around where that flash came out of, they'll probably hit Phoenix for some damage if not kill him. Which is why Phoenix players have been coming up with some more creative ways to use his flash. Whether that's throwing it behind them or throwing it near the ground, you just can't do a standard flash around a corner all the time and get away with it anymore. And I think that getting killed by an enemy that you flashed over and over again definitely leaves a bad taste in players' mouths. The next problem I wanted to talk about has to do with his ultimate. I mentioned earlier about how strong it is for pushing onto sites or getting information, but the player using it needs to be really careful. This is because although Phoenix can't be killed while using his ultimate, he's still vulnerable when it ends. This means that you either need to be extra sure that you're in a safe position when you start ulting, or you're going to need someone else to hold your body for you. Another problem with his ultimate is that it messes up your team's spacing when you try to push onto a site with it. If you ult somewhere and your team gets control of a site, whether the Phoenix dies or the time runs out, he's going to be reset back to the location he ulted from. This leaves you in an awkward situation where your entire team is on site and Phoenix is still left behind at a choke point. This forces the Phoenix player to either watch the flank or risk dying by taking the site all over again. The next point I wanted to make about Phoenix's weaknesses doesn't have anything to do with the abilities he does have, but rather something that's missing in his kit, which is that Phoenix doesn't have the utility to be able to play the same type of aggressive off angles of some of the other duelists in the game. Unlike Jett and Reyna, he doesn't have any sort of escape ability he can use after getting a kill, and unfortunately for Phoenix, he also doesn't have any sort of abilities to allow him to get onto high ground like Raze, Jett, or Omen, which further adds to this problem of his. This means that he's limited to playing near cover if he wants to stay safe. Finally, the last point I wanted to make for why Phoenix has been declining in pick rate has less to do with him and more with the meta, which is that Phoenix has been kind of power crept recently. Now that an agent like Skye is so strong, she's kind of the best option for a team if they need a flash, since she has more control of where the flash goes than Phoenix, and it can also double as an info gathering ability since she has a voice line to tell the player if an enemy was flashed. Also, more importantly, KO is basically a better version of Phoenix in almost every way. They both have mollies with similar strength. Phoenix's can also heal, which makes it more versatile, but in terms of their use as mollies, they're quite similar. KO's flash is stronger in my opinion since it's more versatile, because he can either lob it really close to him to get a similar effect to a Phoenix flash, but he can also throw it to flash further away from him. KO's ult is also basically the same as Phoenix's, with an arguably less negative downside. They can both be used to push onto a site, but KO's ult also turns off the enemy's util, which means that enemies can't really slow down your push. KO's ult just requires more teamwork because your team needs to be there to trade you out so that they can resurrect you after you're downed. But KO's ult also doesn't have the same weaknesses that Phoenix ult has. This is because his body doesn't reset back to its original position. This means that KO doesn't have the same problem with spacing and he doesn't require a teammate to watch his body for him. And then for their last two abilities, they're quite different, so it's a little hard to compare them, but I definitely think that KO's knife is stronger than Phoenix's wall in a lot of situations. But again, it's hard to compare the two. So in comparing all of their abilities, it's pretty clear that KO is kind of just a stronger Phoenix. And since he doesn't seem to be seeing an overwhelming amount of play, how would an agent like Phoenix? Not to say that Phoenix is a bad agent or that there's no reason to use him, because he can still be a strong agent in the right hands and you can definitely still climb while playing him. Hopefully something will change and Phoenix can start to see more play soon. But I think that if nothing changes with this kit, as more powerful agents start getting released, Phoenix's pick rate is just going to continue to fall. With that being said, what kind of changes could be made to help improve him? Well, I thought of a couple that could help him out, and I'll start with the stat change ones since they're less interesting. For one, they could increase the duration of his flash. This could make Phoenix more unpredictable, since there'd be a bigger window of time where he could peek an enemy while they couldn't see. Of course, this wouldn't really help that much if the enemies are flashed near cover, but it might be a way to minimize dying to flashed enemies. They could also increase the healing on either his molly or wall. I don't really like this one, since I don't feel that a simple stat boost is a good way to balance an agent. Also, a lot of the time, the healing from his abilities is already enough, so it might not even matter in a lot of instances. The third change I would recommend would be to allow Phoenix to cancel his ult at any time. This would help mitigate one of the big issues with using it. Of course, you'd still need to be careful of where you used your ult, but it would give you that option to return to it at any time if you think an enemy was flanking your body and you were too far away to run back to it. Or an even bigger buff would be if you cancelled it, you wouldn't even return back to your body at all, which would also fix the spacing issue with it too. Not sure if this change would be too strong though. Anyways, those are all the ideas I came up with. Not sure if they would help or not, but let me know what you guys think. And that's all for this video about Phoenix. If you agree or disagree with any of my points, please leave a comment letting me know. Also, if you have any other ideas on potential changes to Phoenix, please leave them in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe for more Valorant related content.